Trial by water, trial by fire, trial by... It doesn't even matter. It was all bad in the Dark Ages, if I'm being honest. Doesn't matter what crime you're on trial for, something's gonna hurt at the end of the day. Welcome back to Bumblebee. I'm Taylor McWaters, and here are the top 10 scariest punishments from history that'll absolutely freak you out. Number 10, the rack. The rack was a punishment device, if you want to call it that, used during the medieval ages to punish and extract confessions from individuals accused of crimes. It was pretty brutal. It was like 1 to 10 real quick. This device here consisted of a rectangular frame with a roller at each end, and of course a series of ropes or chains connecting to said rollers. The victim would then be laid on the rack with their hands and feet tied to the ropes or chains. You know where I'm going here, it's gonna suck. The rollers would then be turned, causing the victim's limbs to be stretched until they were eventually pulled out of their sockets. Yeah, the pain inflicted by the stretching was so excruciating and could cause, of course, severe injury, dislocation, or sometimes even death. The rack was a popular device used during medieval ages because it was highly effective at getting confessions. Yeah, true or false, they're probably gonna talk, they're gonna say something. However, because the victim was often left permanently disabled or disfigured as a result of the punishment, it was widely regarded as cruel and, an inhumane practice. Yeah, you don't say. You can't just leave the guy's arm out of his socket because you got the truth. You can't do that. It's not fair. At least, smack it back in or something. Let him go. Number 9, dunking. Dunking, also known as trial by water, but dunking sounds a bit more fun. It was a medieval method used to determine the guilt or innocence of a person accused of a crime. Again, 0 to 10. Real quick, this one. The accused would be bound and then lowered into a body of water, like a dirty river or a dirty pond or something gross and disgusting. It was the Dark Ages, right? Nothing was filtered back then. And they would be considered guilty if they sank, and they were innocent if they, survived and floated back to the top. The belief here was that the water here would judge you. Only the purest of souls would come out and live. But if you're not pure, say you're a witch, you're probably gonna drown. Bad news. This practice was particularly prevalent in Europe during the Middle Ages, although it was used in other parts of the world. Dunking was often used for women accused of witchcraft or other crimes, and it was believed that the accused would be protected by God if they were truly innocent. Yeah, God's like, hey, stop drowning each other. I don't know, just an idea, maybe. That'll help. Number 8, the punishment of non-existence. This is one of my favorites. In ancient Rome, the punishment of non-existence was even worse than getting blocked today. Yeah, believe it or not, such a thing exists. Back then, they would punish the accused by erasing the memory of an individual or a group from history. Yeah, this was long-form punishment here. This was done by destroying any and all physical evidence of their existence. Statues, inscriptions, and they would ban the use of their name. Yeah, you piss off the wrong pharaoh, now you're Voldemort. You're he who shall not be named now. We're not even gonna talk about you. That's how bad it's gonna be. It was typically used to punish individuals who had committed treason or other very serious crimes against the state, but could also be applied to those who were simply unpopular with the ruling class. Yeah, if you were a dick, they just wiped you out from history. That ought to suck. Think of how many people we don't even know about today because of this punishment. It's weird when you think about it that way. Getting canceled, but in ancient Rome, brutal. The effectiveness of this one varied depending on the circumstances. See, in some cases, it succeeded in erasing all memory of the individual or group, while in other cases, it only generated more interest in them. They're like, oh, who's this bad boy who spoke back to a pharaoh? What a hero. This guy said it. We're all thinking it, and he said it. Follow. Ancient Egypt. We'll follow him on Egyptian Pharaoh Twitter. Number 7, drawn and quartered. Okay, this gets to the nitty-gritty stuff. Here we go. Last time I mentioned this while we were talking about another punishment, so I gotta give this more time. Drawing and quartering. What does that mean? This one was a common penalty for men who were convicted of high treason in the Kingdom of England around 1352. And this one here is straight from Game of Thrones. It's pretty brutal, so if you're eating some noodles right now, just maybe put them to the side. Give that a rest for a bit. Basically, whoever the convicted was, the person would be hanged, almost to the point of them losing their life, but not quite. Now from there, they would be disemboweled into 4 pieces. The arm, the leg, 5 really, or the head, 6. I don't know, I'm not good at math. Many pieces of you spread around. And because this simply wasn't enough for some insane reason, the pieces of you would then be displayed in prominent places across the country. Yeah, you see a torso and be like, oh, what's the story here? I wonder what he did. Must have been pretty bad. Number 6, no insults. This one's great for YouTube today. No insults. Keep the comment section clean, except the mustache. You can make fun of this. Go to town on this. Honestly, I deserve it. If you hurled insults at somebody, they were entitled to compensation, and they could summon everybody else around you at the time to be a witness. Yeah, medieval ages. They have nothing but word of mouth, so you gotta trust them. If you spoke bad of somebody during the Viking Age, even if the person wasn't around at the time, you were just, talking smack smack behind their Viking back, it could ruin their reputation, and because of that, you need to pay them for the possible damages that those words caused. It doesn't even matter if the insult was true either. Your reputation was really the only way you could gain employment back there, only way you can meet friends. It was really the only important thing not to be messed with at the time. Also, if you insulted one man, insulted his entire family as well. And there were some words, however, where a man would be allowed to kill you if you said it to them. So yeah, sometimes you went a little too far spreading these lies, so they made it a capital punishment. Thou shalt not talk shittish. See ya. Number 5, Scaphism. Okay, halfway through, we're gonna crank it up a little bit. You wanted it? Here you go. It was first used in ancient Persia. Now the victim here would be stripped naked and they would be placed inside of 2 hollowed out tree trunks, or sometimes in between 2 boats. They also called it boating in some references. Horrible. But only their heads and their hands and feet were exposed, and you were literally stuck into this tree, and if that wasn't uncomfortable already in the hot sun, you would then be force-fed milk and honey until you were extremely ill, to say, the least of things. Everywhere. And of course, after all that happening in a tree trunk, as time passes, bugs and maggots would eat away at the victim's flesh, causing infections and gangrene. It gets worse, believe it or not. The process here could take days or even weeks to kill the victim, and it's gonna suck the entire time. This method of punishment was meant to be slow and painful, and of course, in typical ancient fashion, it was very public, serving as a warning, of course, to others who may commit similar crimes. Yeah, don't do that, or else you'll end up a tree. A big, stinky, horrible tree. Yeah, let's go. What you get for stealing an apple, I guess. Number 4, Matzatello. Sounds like a yummy cheese type, but it is not. No, not even close. Matzatello was a method of capital punishment that was occasionally used by the Papal States for some of the most terrible crimes. You would hope, right? Basically, the person here who was being punished, they would be led to a scaffold that was located, of course, in the public square because, well, folks back then didn't have Netflix, they didn't have anything better to do, so they gathered the troops, headed for town, and they would watch people get punished and die all day. It was really brutal. Can't even watch myself get a needle and people are going to watch this shit. It's crazy. At this point, the accused would be accompanied by a priest, and on the scaffold would lie a coffin and a masked, scary executioner who was dressed in all black. A grim sight, really. Something you don't want to see walking up those steps at any day. A prayer would then be said for the soul of the condemned, which was ironic considering what they were about to do to another human being, because the executioner at that point would swing a mallet down on the head of the prisoner, and sometimes, hopefully, this one blow would be enough to take your life, but sometimes it would merely render them unconscious, which would then lead to their throat being cut, again, all in front of a public crowd. Yeah. Next video, we'll do nice castles or something. Top 10 cool medieval movies. Something less grim, maybe, for a change. Thanks. Number 3, the choke pear. Also known as the pear of anguish. Both names are pretty horrible. This one here was a medieval punishment device used to humiliate victims, if you want to say that. It's not funny at all. It's actually terrifying. The device was inserted into the victim's mouth, or sometimes other places. Use your imagination. It's pretty bad. And then this thing was slowly expanded using a screw-like mechanism until it reached full size. It would just go in and open up. Yeah, it's pretty horrible. It sounds like something from the Saw franchise, really. If I describe it anymore, I'm gonna be sick to my stomach. This tool, device, choky pear thing, at this point, it would cause immense pain and often resulted in permanent injury or, obviously, death, especially if it's in your mouth. Are you kidding me? The choke pear was also used to extract confessions from suspects or prisoners. Now, despite its gruesome nature, the choke pear remained in use for centuries and was only officially banned in the 19th century, which is far too recent for me. People would Really? That recent? Okay. Today, examples of the device can be found in museums. So if you see something that looks like a weird looking metal pear, take a minute and reflect on these horrors. They used to punish men for homosexuality with this. Humans are disgusting. Number 2, sensory deprivation. This one was a nightmare, but in a completely different way. Nothing's going in places or nothing's getting stretched apart. It was just you and your brain, which is sometimes bad enough. Now, typically, you would confine the accused here in a dark, soundproof cell, or you'd bind their eyes and ears shut. Terrible. The goal of this punishment was to induce a state of psychological distress into the victim. Now, the idea behind sensory deprivation was that without any external stimuli, the victim here would be forced to confront their own inner demons, their own thoughts and fears would drive them crazy, leading to this sort of mental breakdown, or ideally, for the prisoner's sake here, a confession. Again, even if it's false, just say something to get out of that room. It was also believed that this punishment would be less physically damaging than other forms of punishment, but just as effective, which I have to agree with. The victim would be kept in isolation for days or even sometimes weeks with zero light, no sound, and no human contact at all. The effects of sensory deprivation can be severe. They can include hallucinations, anxiety, depression, and even psychosis. Now, in some cases, victims never fully recovered from the experience. So whether it's a shoulder popped out or your mind, something's gonna break when you leave. And finally, number 1, the blood eagle. The best/worst for last. Here we go. You mentioned it in the last one and we have to talk about it now, I guess. This was a ritual method of punishment that was detailed in late Gallic poetry. Now, in the 2 instances where this horrible punishment was mentioned, the victims here, they both happened to be members of the royal family, and they were both placed in the prone position, and they both had their ribs severed from their spine using a sharp tool. And then they both had their lungs pulled through said opening to create a sort of, well, I guess, a pair of wings. How creative. Everyone's so creative these days, I guess, you know? It's like that TikTok. Everybody's so creative. We love a creative Viking. Both instances where this insane punishment is said to have happened, both of them were accused of killing their own fathers. So I don't know what's going on over there, but quite the daddy issues, it seems. Don't do any of that at any time, I guess. Again, how many steps goes into lunging somebody? Like, back then, with your malnourished hands or medieval hands, I can barely open a box of cereal in the morning. You're telling me some guy pulled ribs out? How strong must you be to pull? That's disgusting. We'll talk about that next time. I've been your host, Taylor McWaters.